He accused her of stealing and threw her out. 4 years later, he saw 2 little girls with his eyes standing beside her. Was it too late to undo his unforgivable mistake? What secret had she kept? Witness a story of devastating betrayal, hidden truths, and a love that refuses to die. Watch now and tell us, would you fight for a second chance? The Unseen Legacy, a father's path to redemption. The city outside Ethan Price's office buzzed with light and ambition. But inside the glass tower that housed his global pharmaceutical empire, everything felt sharp, cold, and controlled. He stood by the massive window of his London office, staring out at the skyline that had long ago ceased to impress him. Blonde hair perfectly styled, blue eyes unreadable. His tailored suit clung to his frame like armor. Ethan was 36, a self-made billionaire, revered in business circles and feared by competitors. Emotion to him was inefficient. Trust was a luxury, and mistakes unforgivable. The email came in just before 7 p.m., flagged urgent by his head of internal audit. Discrepancies in financial reports, flagged transactions, tens of thousands quietly moved over the course of several months. A preliminary investigation had narrowed it down to someone in his personal circle. When he clicked open the final attachment and saw the name, Clara Miller, highlighted in red, something inside him hardened. His jaw tightened, and without pausing to consider alternatives, he picked up his phone and dialed her number. Clara arrived at the penthouse that night to find the door already open. She walked in cautiously, heels clicking softly against marble flooring, sensing the tension before she saw him. He was standing in the living room, her name already cold in his mouth. "I trusted you," he said without a greeting, "and you've been stealing from me." She froze, dark hair pulled back loosely, eyes widening in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Don't play innocent," he snapped. "The accounting logs show funds missing, transfers traced to your access credentials." She stepped forward, hands raised slightly, as though approaching a wild animal. "Ethan, I don't know what they found, but I didn't take anything. I would never." "Don't," he interrupted. "You're not just anyone. You lived here. You had access to my life, and you used it." Her voice caught, breath shallow. "You think I'd betray you like that?" "I think the evidence speaks for itself." She stared at him, stunned. For a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Not anger, not panic. Just quiet devastation. "I thought you knew me better than that," she whispered. "I clearly didn't," he replied. The silence that followed was unbearable, like the seconds before a storm. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply turned and walked to the bedroom, gathered her things into a small travel bag, and came back without saying a word. When she passed him, he didn't move. Didn't ask her to stay. Didn't even look at her. At the door, she paused. "One day, you're going to realize what you lost." Then she left. The lock clicked shut behind her, final and echoing. Ethan remained still, fists clenched at his sides. He didn't speak to anyone else that night. He didn't reread the reports or call for clarification. He told himself he had done the right thing, cut the rot before it spread. But something didn't sit right. Not guilt. Something colder, heavier. Something like silence. What he didn't know was that Clara hadn't just walked out with a suitcase that night. She had walked out carrying 2 lives inside her, still small and silent, growing beneath her heart. And by the time he would come to question what really happened, it would already be too late to stop the story from unfolding. A cruel accusation, a devastating departure, and a secret that will change everything. How would you cope with such a profound betrayal and false accusation? Share your raw emotions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the shocking revelation to come. 4 years had passed, but Ethan never once allowed himself to revisit that night. He had buried it the way he buried everything that made him feel uncertain, beneath achievements, quarterly results, and endless projects. The name Clara never crossed his lips, not in public, not in private. As far as the world knew, she had vanished, and Ethan had moved on. But something about the silence she left behind had never stopped following him, not completely. It lingered in the spaces she used to fill, in the untouched side of the bed, in the music she once played in the mornings, in the way he no longer let anyone close. Now, in early spring of 2025, Ethan was in Edinburgh for a corporate gala, representing his company's expansion into biotech research. It was the kind of event he had attended 100 times. Stiff conversation, expensive wine, predictable compliments from people who needed his signature. After 3 hours of polite smiles and rehearsed speeches, he slipped out early and walked alone toward the curb, phone in hand, ready to call for his driver. That was when he saw her. Clara stood under the glow of a street lamp a few feet away, trying to wrestle a toy out of her bag while 2 small girls clung to either side of her. At first, Ethan froze, thinking the resemblance was playing tricks on him. But it wasn't a mistake. It was her posture, the shape of her face, the softness in the way she knelt down to zip up one of the girls' jackets. It was undeniably her. And the children. They were around 3 years old, maybe a little older. Identical. Small, giggling, clutching stuffed animals. Both had soft blonde curls and large blue eyes. His blue eyes. He didn't move. Couldn't. The world around him dimmed as he stared, his breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat. One of the girls looked up and locked eyes with him for a fleeting second. She blinked slowly, curiously, then turned back to her mother without a word. Clara straightened and followed her daughter's gaze. Their eyes met. She didn't gasp. She didn't stumble. She only stared at him with a calm, unreadable expression, as if she had prepared herself for this moment and was already finished with it. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Before he could find anything to say, Clara gently ushered the girls into a nearby taxi. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. The car door closed with a soft thud, and a moment later, the cab pulled away into the night. 2 tiny faces pressed to the window, watching the city blur around them. Ethan stood frozen, completely still, while people passed him on the pavement, unaware that his world had just shifted. He wasn't sure how long he stood there before his driver approached and asked if he was ready to leave. He nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the street where the cab had disappeared. Something inside him, something he had buried 4 years ago, had just broken the surface. And he knew, without needing anyone to confirm it, that he had just seen his daughters for the first time. The shock of a lifetime. How would you react if you discovered you had children you never knew existed? What's the first thing you'd do? Share your raw emotions and plans in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the unfolding journey. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He paced the length of his hotel suite, replaying the scene over and over again in his mind. Clara under the streetlight, the twins at her side, the fleeting moment their eyes had met, and the look on her face. Not shock, not regret, not anger, just calm distance. He could still see the way the little girl had looked at him, the faint, curious tilt of her head, as if she were looking into a mirror that made no sense. He didn't need proof. The girls were his. He knew it in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to the part of him that had been left hollow for 4 years. By morning, he had made a decision. He didn't contact her directly. He knew she wouldn't respond, not after what had happened. Instead, he hired someone, discreet, a private investigator he had worked with before. He didn't want surveillance or pressure, just an address, something simple, something human. Within 3 days, he had it. A modest townhouse in a quiet part of Cambridge. Nothing extravagant. Not the kind of place he ever imagined Clara would end up in. But maybe that was the point. She had rebuilt without him. He went on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't tell anyone at the office. He didn't even tell his driver. He took a rental car, parked down the block, and sat for almost 20 minutes, staring at the small garden out front, watching as toys scattered the lawn, chalk drawings on the pavement, a tricycle tipped on its side, a tiny pair of shoes near the steps. It was a life, a full, beautiful life that he had no part in. Finally, he got out and walked to the door. When she answered, she didn't look surprised. She looked tired, like she had known this moment would come and had braced for it. "Ethan," she said simply. "I need to talk to you," he replied. His voice was calm, but inside, everything was trembling. Clara didn't invite him in. She stepped outside and closed the door gently behind her, the sound of children's laughter muffled in the background. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I saw you. At the restaurant. The girl." "They're my daughters," she said, her tone firm. "They're mine too," he said, and she didn't correct him. For a moment she studied him. He looked tired, but not in the same way he had when they were together. This was a different kind of exhaustion, like he'd been walking through life on autopilot and had only just realized it. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I didn't know," he said. "If I had." "You didn't want to know," she interrupted. "You were so quick to believe I was a thief. You didn't even let me speak." "I made a mistake. You destroyed everything we had. I was pregnant when you kicked me out, Ethan. I was carrying your children, and you didn't even look back." The words hit him like cold water. He felt it in his chest, a weight so deep it was hard to breathe. "I'm not here to justify what I did," he said after a long pause. "I just want to make things right. Somehow. And what does that look like to you? Money? Lawyers? A press statement? No. I want to be their father." Clara looked down, took a slow breath, then met his eyes. "They don't know you. They've never even heard your name. You don't get to just walk in and claim a title you never earned." "Then let me earn it," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Let me start." She didn't answer right away. The door behind her creaked slightly, and one of the girls peeked through. Clara turned and gently ushered her back inside. When she turned back to Ethan, her face had softened just slightly. "I'm not promising anything, but if you really want to do this, you start with them, not with me." "I understand." "And Ethan," she added, her voice suddenly sharper, "don't do this halfway. If you come in, you stay." He nodded slowly, the full gravity of what she meant settling in his bones. This wasn't a gesture. It wasn't something to fix with a check or an apology. If he wanted to be in their lives, he had to earn it with time, with presence, with patience. She stepped back toward the door. "Come back Saturday. We'll be at the playground 2 blocks down. 10 a.m. Before he could respond, she slipped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. Ethan stood there for a long time, not moving, staring at the place where she had just been. For the first time in 4 years, he felt something unfamiliar. Humility. And beneath it, a flicker of hope. The first step towards a new beginning. What do you think Ethan needs to do to truly earn Clara's trust and his daughter's love? Share your advice in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the difficult but hopeful journey ahead. The playground was small, tucked between 2 apartment buildings with a faded wooden fence and the scent of spring in the air. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in jeans and a sweater he hadn't worn in years, unsure whether he was overdressed or not enough. He stood awkwardly near a bench, his hands in his pockets, scanning the area like someone who had wandered into a place meant for someone else. Children were running in circles, their laughter bright and free. Parents chatted nearby while sipping coffee from paper cups. Ethan felt like an intruder, a man out of place among strollers and pavement chalk. At exactly 10 o'clock, he saw them. Clara approached with a slow, even pace, one hand gently holding each of the girls. They were dressed in matching pastel jackets, their blonde curls bouncing with every step, small trainers lighting up as they walked. They looked around, wide-eyed, taking in the playground like it was a new world. When they reached the gate, Clara knelt and whispered something to them. Both girls nodded, then cautiously let go of her hands and walked over to the sandbox. She joined Ethan and the bench, keeping a bit of space between them. She didn't speak at first, neither did he. They just sat there, both watching the two girls dig and build with plastic shovels, working silently side by side, the way twins often do. Like they shared a private language no one else could fully understand. "They don't know who you are yet," Clara said eventually. Her voice was low, almost drowned by the sounds of play around them. "To them, you're just a man from the street, a stranger." "I get that," Ethan said, eyes still on the girls. "I'm not expecting anything. You'll have to be patient. They're smart, observant, but they don't trust easily." He nodded. "They're yours." Clara glanced at him sideways. "They're ours. You just didn't want to know that before." "I was wrong," he said simply. "And I'm sorry. I can't undo it. But I want to show them something different now. Show you." Silence settled again between them, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. One of the girls, Sky, Clara had said in a text, wandered closer, eyeing Ethan from a distance. He crouched down to her level, careful not to get too close, and smiled. "Hi," he said gently. She didn't answer, just stared at him with a look of serious concentration, like she was measuring the shape of his face, the color of his eyes, the way his voice sounded. "Do you want help with your sandcastle?" he asked, pointing toward her half-built mound. She nodded slowly, then turned and walked back without a word, glancing over her shoulder once to make sure he followed. For the next hour, Ethan sat in the sand, building crooked castles, digging tunnels, and pretending to be amazed every time they buried a toy and discovered it again. The girls didn't say much, but they didn't pull away. They handed him shovels. They giggled when he made animal noises. They pointed at birds and demanded he guess their names. It wasn't connection, not yet, but it was something close to beginning. Clara watched from the bench, arms crossed loosely, her face unreadable. But every so often, she smiled. Not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't help it. When it was time to go, the girls hugged each other goodbye like they always did. As they walked away, Grace, the other twin, turned and waved at Ethan. Not a big wave, just a small, tentative one, as if to say, "You passed the first test." Clara didn't speak as she buckled them into the car. She didn't need to. The way she looked at him as she got into the driver's seat said, more than words would have. "You're not forgiven, not yet. But maybe you're not a stranger anymore either." Ethan stood in the car park long after the car pulled away, watching the sun filter through the trees and feeling, for the first time in years, like something in him was waking up. Not guilt, not regret. Something better. Something he hadn't felt since before he lost her. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was love. Or maybe it was the beginning of being the kind of man his daughters might one day run toward instead of away from. Small steps, big changes. What do you think will be the next challenge for Ethan in building a relationship with his daughters? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heartwarming moments. Over the next several weeks, Ethan began to show up regularly. At the playground, at the library, where Clara often took the girls for story hour, and sometimes just outside their home when invited, sitting on the porch steps with a bag of coloring books or little puzzles he'd picked out himself. He never arrived unannounced. He never stayed too long. He let the girls lead, and Clara watched him closely, not as a test, but because she didn't quite know how to stop watching him. For someone who had once shut down so easily, Ethan was becoming gentle, intentional, present. At first, the girls treated him like a new neighbor. They asked cautious questions, often through Clara. They were curious about his car, about whether he liked frogs or strawberries, whether he could tie his own shoes. But as the visits grew longer and more consistent, the tone shifted. Ethan started to become a fixture, not quite a parent yet, but something more than a visitor. They laughed louder when he arrived. They ran to show him their drawings. They climbed into his lap without asking, and told him nonsense stories that made no sense, but lit up his face like sunrise. Then came the conversation about legal rights. Ethan didn't bring it up. Clara did. They were sitting on her back porch while the girls napped inside, the baby monitor between them humming quietly. A soft spring wind moved the curtains behind the screen door. "You need to be on their birth certificates," she said plainly. He blinked, surprised. "I didn't expect you to say that." "I'm not doing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it because they're going to start asking questions soon. Real ones. About where you were, why you weren't there, who they are. And when they do, I want the answer to be honest." He swallowed hard. "I want to be there for all of that. Not just the easy parts." She nodded. "Then prove it. Not just in court. Every day." They filed the paperwork together. It was clinical, procedural. Signatures, identity checks. A hearing with a family court judge who looked over the documents and studied them both like they were barely keeping it together. But when the judge looked up and asked if either of them had anything to add, Clara spoke first. "I'm not here because I trust easily," she said. "I'm here because I've seen what he's becoming. And I want my daughters to grow up knowing the version of their father that's here now, not the one who left." The judge nodded slowly. "And you, Mr. Price." Ethan cleared his throat. "I was wrong. I acted without thinking, without listening, and I've missed years I can never get back. But I'm here now, and I'll be here tomorrow and every day after that, because they're mine, and I want to earn the right to be theirs." The judge granted his parental rights that day. It didn't come with fanfare or applause, but Ethan left the courthouse with the kind of quiet, shaking breath you take when your heart finally starts working again. That night, Clara let him tuck the girls into bed. He read them a story about a bear who couldn't hibernate and ended up discovering spring. The girls curled up on either side of him, eyes half closed, their small fingers wrapped around his thumb. When the story ended, Grace asked if he'd be back tomorrow. "I will," he said softly, "every tomorrow." Clara stood in the doorway, watching. She didn't say a word, but when he turned to leave, she reached out without thinking and brushed her hand lightly against his arm. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first time she touched him in 4 years. And that meant something. Something that neither of them could explain, but both of them felt. Something real. Something fragile. Something beginning. A monumental step forward, and a touch that speaks volumes. Do you believe Clara is beginning to heal and open her heart to Ethan again? Share your emotional insights in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next tender developments. The rain came down in a steady rhythm that afternoon, tapping against the windows of Ethan's office as he stared blankly at his computer screen. The city below was blurred and gray, and for once, work couldn't distract him. His thoughts were tangled with memories, ones he had pushed away for too long. It had been nearly 2 months since the court had recognized his parental rights, and everything had changed. The girls now called him Daddy without hesitation. They drew pictures of him and ran into his arms when he arrived. But still, something lingered between him and Clara, something unresolved, and it gnawed at him, more quietly than guilt, but deeper than regret. Later that week, Clara appeared unexpectedly at his office. She looked tired, but not upset. She walked in with a folder in her hand and a strange expression on her face, part hesitation, part resolution. Ethan stood up the moment he saw her, his heart rising into his throat. She didn't sit. She simply laid the folder down on the desk and pushed it toward him. "I found these when I was going through some old things," she said quietly. "They're from the night you accused me." He hesitated, then slowly opened the folder. Inside were copies of internal company memos, signed logs, and a printed chain of emails that detailed a technical error involving a different employee. His eyes scanned the documents, and the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Clara hadn't taken anything. The missing funds had been part of a miscommunication and a clerical error that someone else had covered up to protect their job. The evidence was there, clear and damning. Not against her, but against the system he had trusted more than the woman he loved. His breath caught in his throat as he looked up at her. "Why didn't you show me this before?" She crossed her arms, but not defensively. Her voice was calm, even. "Because you didn't ask. Because you didn't listen. And if I had handed you these papers that night, would it have changed anything?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth hung between them, too bitter for excuses. "I saved them," she continued, "not to prove you wrong, but because part of me always hoped you'd realize it on your own." He sat down slowly, the weight of what he had done settling deeper than before. This wasn't just about custody, or rights, or even the lost years. This was about trust, the kind you can't rebuild with court orders or scheduled visits. This was about the moment he had chosen fear over faith in someone he once claimed to love. "I was scared," he said finally. "Scared of being wrong, of being used. I let that fear destroy everything." Clara looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, he saw the pain behind her strength. Not bitterness, not resentment, just quiet exhaustion. "I had to build a life from nothing," she said, "while carrying 2 babies, alone. Do you know what that felt like? Being accused of something unforgivable and having no one believe in you." "I can't fix it," he said, voice low, "but I swear to you, I'll never doubt you again." She nodded once, slowly. Then, after a moment, she turned to leave. Before she reached the door, she paused. "The girls are watching us," she said softly. "If we want them to know what love looks like, we have to show them, even if we're still figuring it out." Then she was gone, leaving the door gently swinging behind her. Ethan sat there for a long time, staring down at the folder that had the power to change everything, if only he had cared to read it 4 years earlier. But in that moment, he understood something that he hadn't before. Redemption wasn't just about being present. It was about taking responsibility, not for the outcome, but for the wound. That night, he didn't bring a gift to the girls. He brought a letter, handwritten, for Clara. Not to apologize again, but to tell the full truth. About his fear, about his failure, and about how he was ready, not just to be a father, but to become someone worthy of the life he almost lost. The truth is finally out, revealing a deeper betrayal. What do you think this full confession will mean for Clara and Ethan? Can trust truly be rebuilt from such deep wounds? Share your emotional insights in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next tender chapter. Summer arrived gently, and with it came a rhythm that neither Ethan nor Clara had expected to feel again. The girls now looked for Ethan as naturally as they looked for Clara, their days full of games and questions and tiny rituals that made his presence feel permanent. He had rented a small townhouse just 10 minutes from their place, not because he needed it, but because he wanted the girls to feel that he was close. Close enough to show up for story time, for preschool pickup, for the days when one of them woke up with a fever and just needed to be held. Ethan, once a man known only for high-rise offices and boardroom control, now spent entire afternoons assembling dollhouses, baking undercooked cookies, and singing terribly off-key lullabies. Clara, cautious by nature and habit now, didn't resist his involvement. But neither did she give in too quickly. She watched him with a quiet attentiveness, tracking his consistency, his patience, the way he responded to their daughters when things were messy, or loud, or simply human. She noticed how he never reached for his phone anymore when he was with them, how he sat in tiny plastic chairs and listened to their nonsense stories like they were the most important words ever spoken. He wasn't playing at fatherhood, he was becoming one. Sometimes Clara stayed for dinner. At first it was practical. Timing, logistics, convenience. Then the moment stretched a little longer. She helped clean up. They shared coffee. They talked cautiously about the girls, about their days, and eventually, quietly, about the past. He didn't defend himself. She didn't accuse. They just let the air between them settle with the truth neither had said aloud in years. One evening, after the girls had fallen asleep in their matching twin beds, Clara lingered in the doorway. The house was quiet, except for the humming of the night light and the soft sound of their breathing. Ethan stood beside her, arms folded, his expression soft with wonder. "Sky says she dreams about castles now," Clara whispered, nodding toward Grace. "Big ones, with windows that touch the sky." "I used to think all she'd want from me were answers," Ethan murmured. "But it's stories. They want stories." Clara turned toward him, her face unreadable. "They want you, but they also want safety, consistency. You being here, not just now, but always." "I will be," he said, "whatever it takes." She nodded slowly, and for a moment, the space between them felt less like a boundary and more like a beginning. Later that week, Grace climbed into his lap and asked why he didn't live in the same house with them. Her voice was curious, not sad, but the question struck him deep. He didn't answer right away. Then Clara, sitting across the room folding laundry, looked up and replied gently, "Sometimes grown-ups need time to understand where their real home is." Grace accepted the answer, curling deeper into Ethan's arms, already drifting toward sleep. That night, Ethan stayed a little longer. After Clara tucked the girls in, they sat on the back steps in silence, the moon rising behind thin clouds. "I used to think love meant making big promises," he said. "But maybe it's just showing up, quietly, every day." Clara looked over at him. "You're learning." "I'm trying," he said. "You're doing it," she replied. She didn't say more, but when she stood to leave, she didn't walk away with the same guarded stiffness as before. Instead, she paused, glanced back once, and smiled, not politely, not cautiously, but warmly, and it stayed with him all night, that small, unexpected smile, like a door creaking open after years of being shut, a quiet, steady rebuilding of a family. What do you think the future holds for Ethan and Clara, beyond the immediate joy? Can true forgiveness blossom from such a painful past? Share your heartfelt thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the truly emotional conclusion. The morning of the girl's 4th birthday arrived with golden light streaming through the windows and the sound of tiny feet thumping against the wooden floor. The house was already filled with balloons, ribbons, and the sugary scent of vanilla cake that Ethan had baked, imperfectly, but proudly, the night before. He had never decorated a party in his life, but now he was tying streamers to chairs and inflating balloons until his hands ached, all because his daughters had asked for the prettiest birthday ever. Clara arrived early, carrying a bag full of handmade paper crowns and a box of fresh strawberries, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw what Ethan had done to the living room. It wasn't polished or Pinterest perfect, but it was bright, cheerful, full of care, and real. The girls came running in their birthday dresses, giggling as they twirled and demanded everyone look at the sparkles. They both hugged Ethan first, then ran to Clara, showering her with kisses and tugging at her to help put on their crowns. For the first time in 4 years, it felt like a family celebration. Not an arrangement, not a compromise. A real, shared joy. Guests arrived in waves. Neighbors, preschool friends, Clara's cousins, and even one of Ethan's oldest friends from university, who had flown in after hearing that something big was happening in his life. The garden was transformed into a playland of colored streamers, face paint, tiny tables, and a bubble machine that ran almost non-stop. The girls bounced between their parents, tugging them into games, handing out stickers, and announcing proudly to anyone who would listen, "That's my daddy, and that's my mommy." Ethan noticed the way Clara laughed more freely now, the way her eyes lingered on him longer than before, without tightening, how she no longer flinched at closeness or quiet moments. After the games and cake and chorus of happy birthday, the children gathered in a circle on a picnic blanket, and Grace suddenly stood up, holding a folded piece of paper. She whispered something into her sister's ear, who nodded solemnly. "We made a wish," Grace announced, clutching the paper with both hands. "It's for Mommy and Daddy." Skye stepped beside her and added, "It's very important." Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance but said nothing. They waited. Grace carefully opened the paper and, with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster, read aloud, "We wish that Mommy and Daddy will live together in the same house, so we don't have to say goodbye anymore." The garden fell silent for a moment. Some parents chuckled softly, touched, while others looked away to give space to something so personal and raw. Ethan's heart clenched. He looked at Clara, who was blinking rapidly, trying not to cry. Later, after the party had ended and the last of the guests had gone, Ethan and Clara sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet again. The girls had fallen asleep side by side in a makeshift fort built from couch cushions and blankets. Ethan held the wish paper in his hand, smoothing it out with his thumb. "I didn't ask them to write that," he said gently. "I know," Clara replied. "It's what they want." "And you?" he asked, but looking at her. She took a long breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "I never thought we'd come back from what happened. But watching you with them, watching you become this man, I think maybe we didn't lose everything. Maybe we just paused." He looked up at her. There was no fear in her face, no distance, only clarity and something soft, like quiet acceptance. "I'm not asking for everything," he said. "Not today. Just a chance to build what they see in us." Clara stood and walked to the living room, where the girls lay tangled in blankets, their hands still clasped, even in sleep. She called softly over her shoulder, "Then maybe it's time we stopped living in 2 houses." Ethan didn't move right away. He just watched her, his heart pounding not with panic, but with something gentler. Certainty. He rose, walked over to stand beside her, and together they looked down at their daughters, at the two little people who had pulled them back from the edge and unknowingly taught them how to try again. There was no grand speech, no kiss, no cinematic moment. Just two people, standing close, finally ready to share the weight of the past and the promise of what could still be. It was quiet, and it was enough. This ending is powerful in its quietness. It doesn't rely on dramatic twists or a perfect reconciliation. It earns its weight through emotional growth, humility, and the choice to rebuild what was broken. Ethan's transformation isn't sudden. It's slow, real, and deeply human. He doesn't win Clara back with money or apologies, but with presence, consistency, and the willingness to own his past without defending it. Clara's decision to let him in again is equally courageous, not out of weakness, but from strength, choosing to forgive not because she forgot, but because she saw who he had become. What makes the ending satisfying is that it doesn't offer fantasy. It offers hope. It shows that people can change, that love can survive even through betrayal, and that sometimes the most unexpected second chances are the ones we're most afraid to want. The twin girls, unknowingly, become the heart of the story, not just because they represent a hidden truth, but because they remind both adults what it means to love without conditions and to believe in the possibility of healing. It's a quiet triumph, and those, I think, are the most lasting kind.